Welcome back. So Saturday I was in the shop pretty much the whole day. I think it was from 9:30 till 6:30 or something, working on putting all the different pieces back together for the exhaust on the engine. So here they all sitting there after coming back from ceramic coating, and they look nice, and it'll be interesting to see if there's any sort of performance gain. And a little way into the day, I've got most of the bits mounted there to the different housings. So next step is to put them up on the engine and hopefully get everything aligned again, because you've got to have the exhausts have to mate up to the turbos and such. And this is how it looked about 6 p.m. on Saturday. So I got everything bolted back on and everything hooked back up and ready to fire it up. But I didn't actually fire it up on Saturday evening because I wanted to check over a few things, and I just ran out of daylight, or at least time I was exhausted. So anyway, this is the other side to see how that looks. As you can see, it all looks nice. It definitely looks nice and clean and tidy sort of look now, with everything that same color, at least everything for the hot side. But as I said, the question will be, how much of a difference does it make in terms of the heat being radiated from the whole system. And so I came in briefly on Sunday just to give it a quick run, not for any length of time, just to run it, just to see if there was any issues. And this is it, just warming up here initially, and my goal was just to run it up probably to full power and just see how it was, and then take some readings with the infrared camera. And as you'll see here, I didn't have any issues initially, and so I'll let you watch this and you can see kind of what happens here as it runs up. So it turns out I didn't actually hook up my regular water cooling thing for the heat exchanger, and there was a little bit of water left in that heat exchanger and it actually boiled, and that's what the steam is there coming out. So anyway, not a big deal. You guys were all freaked out thinking something bad was going to happen. So anyway, here's some FLIR video there from right after that run, just to see kind of what we're seeing. And look, it's still pretty hot coming off the exhaust pipe there, or off the headers. So, it's 300 degrees there, 340 degrees. So, I mean, the ceramic coating may be doing, you know, something, a little bit of gain in that, but I don't think it's going to be enough for what we're looking for. So I mean, you know, I think there is a performance gain there, and I've got some numbers, you know, from the ECU that kind of show that maybe there was a 10% improvement in the heat from the EGT temperatures for the same RPM. But either way, I'm still going to wrap that exhaust, at least the headers, and put the turbo blankets back on the turbos, because look at 500 degrees there. That's a bit hot to be having under the cowling there without any protection. So the turbo blankets will go back on there and wrap everything back up. And I think we'll just, you know, call it a day once that's done, because then we'll have, you know, ceramic coating inside, outside, and also the wrapping and the turbo blankets, and I can't do any more than that to keep it cool. Anyway, so that's kind of where we stand with the ceramic coating and the results from that, at least for right now. Now, you may recall that I had lost a file there last weekend, so I had spent some time during last week to actually rebuild some of that, or redo some of that, and this is some of that done, and I actually had some time again on Sunday afternoon to do some more. So basically the elevator controls is what I've been working on here. So there's one of the side sticks there, and ultimately that's going to connect to with a rod to this particular arm, which turns this torque tube there. So there's a mounting bracket for that. So there's a torque tube, and there's another sort of mounting bracket with a bearing there, and then another little belt crank kind of thing there, and there'll be another connecting rod from there running up to the one that goes through the bulkhead. And you've seen this one already. That one's already done and installed basically, or actually the part isn't, but the bulkhead fitting and the bearings and stuff are in there. And so then that comes out the other side, and that rotates around, and then there'll be another connecting rod going from there down to the little short arm of this one, and then that rotates, and then there'll be a connecting rod running from the top to one side and from the bottom to the other side, and that'll actually hook up to the elevator and be actuating the elevators out on the foreplane through a couple of bell cranks, one on either side, or actually a couple on either side. So as I said, that thing will be rotating, connecting rod to either of those holes there, and running out along the inside of the foreplane there with connecting rod. And you can see I've got the sketch geometry in here. So it'll basically rotate around a bell crank there, and then that'll rotate here, and then it'll be basically actuating the elevator. And you'll see more of this coming down the track. But anyway, I managed to get most of it all sorted out, at least all the geometry again. I had done this a while ago, but there were some changes and stuff that I've made to it. And this thing here, this is the trim control, and I think I've shown this before when I was doing all the avionics stuff. So it's basically a sort of flexible little hook there that'll put force on the elevator torque tube to allow you to adjust the trim. And then this is one of the boxes there. That's the one for the elevator control for the autopilot, and again that will hook up to that same little arm there on the torque tube. Okay, so Monday morning, back to the real work week. So here's those ribs that the guys were laying up there last week. Have just been basically pulled out of the molds here, and just all rough edges need to be trimmed off. And my first job for the day was to cut out these brackets for the seat belts, the ones that are going to mount to the roof, and keep the inertial reel belt sort of pinned against the roof as it comes from the back pressure wall where the reel is, and then goes to the back of the seats. So I'm just cutting these out of a big rectangular tube of 1/4 inch thick 6061 aluminum, and so I just did one side and then flipped it around and did the other side. And so I've got two different shaped brackets there. The ones in the middle there are sort of symmetrical, and the other ones that are in the back are a little bit more sort of slope backwards. As you can see, the ones there on the left hand side, those are the ones for the back. So the idea was to cut out the shape on both sides, and then be able to use the bandsaw to finally cut them from the actual big rectangular tube. So here they are all cleaned up, ready to cut out with the bandsaw, and it didn't take too long to do that, and you'll see them in a minute to see how they came out. And meanwhile, here's Zach getting ready to put down the heavyweight layer for the last of the molds here. This is the last rear seat mold. And he's just starting out putting down the first layer there of the heavyweight glass. So once I had those brackets cut out, it was time to drill the holes that are going to be used to mount them inside the fuselage. So just using a 4-bolt pattern here with 3/16 inch holes, and those there I also drilled and tapped those. Those are the hard points that are going to get mounted in the fuselage and have a layer put over the top of them. And there's the brackets all finished, so they're ready to go off to powder coat now. And that's a nice little scratch there. That's what happens when you don't readjust the Z on the machine and you break a bit while you're moving over to drill a hole. So that'll be there for all time's sake. And here's the guys getting ready, or starting to do the layup, or actually almost finished doing the layup on the baggage doors. So this mold wasn't finished that long ago, and because it was sort of in the shop, I guess Jeff's kind of just switched into a mode like just grab a mold and let's make the parts, and just flying through them all now. And here, as you've seen before, if you've been following closely, they're just in the process of putting the bag down on there, removing the backing there on the green tacky tape, and just sealing that bag as it sort of goes along. And this is what it looks like when it's under the vacuum. So there's another one done, and that'll be cured up and released the next day. And Monday evening I got another quick run on the engine and actually managed to find another oil leak. Same one from before, so that Felpro gasket that I'm using on that turbo mount is just not doing the job, so I'm actually going to switch it out to a stainless steel gasket that I have that I think is going to work, and do a couple of other little changes to fix that. But overall the engine is looking good. And now we're on to today, Tuesday. Devon is laying up another bit of flat stock that we'll be using for a few items in the near future. It's always good to have some of that on hand. And there's Zach just getting underway for creating the bracing for the seat mounts, the rear seat mounts. So just cutting out that profile out of the foam. And my next job was to create or modify my little jig that I had before for the door locks, so I could actually create or drill a few holes for where the door lock, pin lock actuators is going to sort of pop out the side of the frame. So here I got these 2 holes that I drilled there, and I'll basically put this into each of the door frames and then drill those holes out at the back side. And so you'll see here in a second what the whole purpose of this is. But basically drill those holes there, and they'll go through the carbon fiber and come out the back side there on that little face. Ultimately that little actuator there has to pop out of a slot, and so here you can see I've drilled the holes there. The next thing to do is just use a Dremel there and cut the slot, and this is what it looks like when it's done. So now you can actually have that actuating, so there'll be connecting rods hooking up to that arm there, or connecting rod, yeah, so they can work off the single handle for opening the door, and that's how they're all going to work. The ones for the hooks are similar to that, but the pins are all basically the same. So that's how that is. And remember, those door locks are just for the prototype only. Way too much work to do them for production, but we just got to fight through and get it done now. And here's the guys laying up the second one of those door covers there for the main gear door, and that one's complete now. Okay, next job, finish off these brackets there that hold the gas struts for the doors, that keep the doors open. As you can see, I kind of marked out where I'm going to cut those, and this is what they look like once they're cut, and a little sand around the edges and stuff. So those are ready to go off to powder coat now, and we'll have them back, I guess, next week or sometime. I'm not sure when I'm going to do another drop off on that. And meanwhile, Jeff's been busy creating the fuel lines that connect the header tank to the straight tanks. So there's 2 feeds coming from each straight tank into the header tank. So these are the lines that he's been fitting and bending and everything, and so they're all done now. And as you'll see in a second, it's a bit difficult to show you, they're fitted in, and they won't be coming out. So the next thing for him to do is to get the vent lines sorted out, and he's got it all basically figured out, and just needs to get it all done. So there you can see there's one of them coming out of bottom of the straight tank there, and it runs down underneath that bracket and it joins back up and goes into that valve that you saw last time, the shut-off valve. There's a Y there where the two different lines from the straight tanks come in, and then ultimately just going straight into the header tank. So that's that job done, and not too much more to do in terms of fuel lines there behind there before that's all finished. And there's the baggage doors released and trimmed already. So let's pick up the edge here so you can see what that looks like. They need a little bit more trim work off there just to bring them right back to that final edge, but that's the sort of stuff that can just be done by hand later on. And the guys got this one finished with the bracing, so that's the last big mold there. Still got some molds and stuff to do for the ribs for the foreplane, but no big molds. And here are those ribs for the rudders and the vertical stabilizers now trimmed off and looking good. And next you're just going to see the seatbelt bracket that I'm working on, which you'll see finished next time. And one last thing, so even though I said last time, please don't come by the shop if you're thinking to come by the shop, we had some people come by the shop again today. And oh yeah, I just want to have, I don't want to take your time, I just want to go in the shop and just poke around. And like, yeah, no. You can't just come in the shop and poke around, you know. That's not how we work. I don't come to your work and say I want to just poke around and see what you guys are doing out the back. So please, if you're thinking of coming out the shop, don't come. We don't have time. Anyway, that's our update for the first half of this week. Thanks for watching.